Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon or this morning as we're coming in and waiting for everyone to get settled. Please share in the chat if you're able where you're located, what state you're in, what your role is that's bringing you here today. And if you're up for it, please share what was your favorite thing to do as a child. We'll spend just about a minute and a half, maybe, letting everybody get in. So if you're able to just introduce yourselves in the chat, that'd be great. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. People will keep joining us, but let's go ahead and begin. Thank you so much for being here today. Mallary and I and the Fred Rogers Institute and the ParentPowered teams are just really excited to be having this conversation, and we're glad you've chosen to spend some time with us. Just a quick couple housekeeping things. This will be recorded. You will receive the recording after, so if you need to step away, no problem, you will get the recording soon. If you have questions as we go along, there is a Q&A feature at the bottom of the Zoom. Please drop your questions there, and we will try to get to as many of those at the end as we can. The chat is great for chatting with each other, kind of sharing your thoughts. Certainly, if you have a tech issue, we have people keeping an eye on the chat for things like that. Everyone is muted. When we have some breakout time for discussion later, you'll be able to unmute and come off video then. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide and introduce ourselves. Mallary, if you'd like to go ahead.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for being here today. My name is Mallary Swartz, and I'm Senior Director of Learning and Impact at ParentPowered. For those of you who don't know about us, we're focused on providing easy-to-use, highly accessible parenting tools for children all the way from birth through high school. So their tools are for parents, and the evidence-based family engagement programs use text messages to help them in supporting their children's learning. So that's a little bit about ParentPowered. A little about me. I'm an applied researcher focused on family engagement. I've been doing this for over 20 years, mostly focused on building research program partnerships, on evaluation, continuous quality improvement. And I started out as an infant and toddler teacher, and most of my career has been focused on early childhood. So I have a really special place in my heart for the little ones. But I'm also the mama of 2 middle schoolers now, which I can't believe I'm even saying that. So I'm definitely learning a lot in that role too. So now, Emma, would you like to go ahead?
Yes, so I'm the Associate Director at the Fred Rogers Institute. And if you don't know, the Fred Rogers Institute is based in Fred's hometown of Latrobe, Pennsylvania. So we are in Mr. Rogers' original neighborhood. This is where Fred chose to put his archive and this institute when he was retiring from his work in television, with the goal of working with adults who would be going on to work with children. So we're on the campus of St. Vincent College here in Latrobe, and we work with college students here, but we also work with all adults, and as we refer to them, helpers who are supporting children and young people. We do a lot of professional development and resources for educators, parents, community members. So my background is in early childhood development, particularly focused on the role of adults in a child's life. And I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. I want to quickly just intro you to some other people here on the screen. From ParentPowered and from Fred Rogers Institute, we have here Rebecca, Sarah, and Annie, and they're all joining us. They'll be hopping into breakout rooms later, so you'll get to see them a bit. So to move on to Fred Rogers. So many or most of you probably know Fred Rogers as Mr. Rogers. And what you might know or might have wondered about is what's similar and what's different between Mr. Rogers that we know from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and Fred Rogers, who was not on the show. And here at the Institute, in the archive, we have 22,000 items from Fred's life and work that show us that there really wasn't a difference. So the Mr. Rogers we see on the screen is the Fred Rogers that that lived and worked with children and families. And of course, we think about his work so much as directly child-facing, but he did a lot of direct speaking and writing to parents and professionals. So I wanted to share this quote with you all to kind of ground this discussion today. It's that parents don't come full bloom at the birth of their first baby. In fact, parenting is about growing. It's about our own growing as much as our children's growing. And that kind of growing happens little by little. So we think all of the time about children growing. And I know for most of you in your roles, that's what you do. You are supporting children and young people in their growth. And today we're going to talk about parents and the ways that they grow and what that means for family engagement and how we as professionals can support parents. So our goals today are to examine the research on family engagement. Why does it matter what it is? Explore what parents are experiencing as their children grow through the different stages of childhood, and consider how to support and engage with families across the ages and stages. What's the same? What changes? So to quickly give you our agenda, we're going to overview family engagement research. We'll have a breakout group time so you can all discuss together what parenting is like at these different ages and stages. We'll dive into parent development research and theories. We'll talk about family engagement across ages, and then we'll put it all together. So as one more kind of grounding piece for this discussion, here's a simple and we think really good definition of family engagement. Family engagement is the ongoing partnership between families, schools, and the community at large to support and strengthen the learning, development, and well-being of all children and families. So with that, Mallary, I'll turn it to you.
Thank you so much, Emma. So we're going to spend just a little bit of time talking about the research on family engagement and why it matters. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I'm an applied researcher. So I always am thinking about how to represent the research in clear and simple ways. So I can't take credit for this design because our designer did this, but I just love how this kind of summarizes the main findings around the research. So why do we engage families in their children's learning and development? We do it because we know it works. So decades of research have shown that a stronger connection between home and school means better outcomes for students, for teachers, families, and schools. So this slide here highlights that when schools prioritize family engagement, teachers are more satisfied, school climate's better, and parents are more involved. And then when families are more involved, they have better support and more access to resources. They learn how to advocate for their children, and they're more engaged in their children's learning as well. And we know that when families are more engaged in their children's learning, the parent-child relationship improves. Children are more regulated, they're more ready to learn, kids get better grades, their math and reading scores go up, attendance and graduation rates increase as well. Ultimately, this leads to children doing better in school and life. One thing I want to note before we move on is that these findings we kind of aggregated across tons of research, right? So this is across diverse samples of families. But a really important thing to remember and a next important step will be to dig more deeply into research with particular communities or particular groups and to consider how things are the same or different across, but also within those communities. So I always like to share that. There's just so much more that we could talk about here, but this is just to kind of ground us in the research overall. So on the next slide, so what we wanted to do here is to just kind of ground us again and share a few research highlights from each age group. So for many of you, this will be really familiar if you work with these groups, but the first 3 years of life we know are a time of very rapid brain development. We also know that attachment research shows that parent-child relationship quality is crucial to infants and toddlers' emotional, physical, and cognitive development. Parent-child interactions are also affected by the fit between a child's temperament and their parent's temperament. And when families engage their babies and toddlers in everyday learning activities and they build these into their everyday routines, they can help them develop a love for learning, and they develop motivation and persistence as well. And finally, social support helps reduce parental stress and depression. It can increase parental self-efficacy, improve parents' understanding of their children, and again, the quality of those parent-child relationships. Next, during the preschool years, children begin to gain independence. They build more self-awareness and develop their own strong interests. Um, I always like to think about this in this way. If anyone's ever played with dinosaurs or trucks with a preschooler, you know what I mean about strong interests. They will tell you every single thing about them. Um, so family engagement can have many positive effects on preschoolers' social emotional development. This includes their self-regulation, their interpersonal skills, attention, memory, academic development. This includes math and literacy, so all kinds of really good things. Preschoolers are also active learners. So through play and hands-on activities, they learn about the world, they develop foundational math, literacy, and science skills. And parents, again, play an important role in supporting these skills during everyday routines, like we talked about with babies and toddlers. Overall, these improved social and academic skills contribute to school readiness, and they help children to be more likely to transition successfully from preschool into kindergarten. Next, family engagement in the elementary years leads to increases in math and literacy scores and also higher rates of attendance. It boosts students' self-confidence, their motivation to learn, and their sense of belonging, and it deepens that parent-child relationship. And families benefit too. So they experience a wider support system, and then they have more access to resources, and they also build and grow their abilities to advocate for their children. In middle school, research tells us that when parents are engaged, the gains are tremendous. So there's higher rates of self-reliance in children, higher GPAs, better physical health, and positive career planning aspirations, as well as lower rates of depression and behavior challenges. Research tells us that parents want to be engaged at this age. And finally, in high school, there are tons of benefits as well. So studies show that parents across socioeconomic status levels play a key role in promoting upward mobility and motivating children to think about future employment and helping students to navigate both educational and career decisions. Studies also show, believe it or not, that adolescents value parental guidance. I say believe it or not because I have a 14-year-old. Sometimes it's hard to believe, but it is true, particularly about academic choices and personal goal setting. So that's a little bit about the research. I'm going to turn it over to Emma now.
Great. So now that we've considered these different stages of childhood and what family engagement means in each of those stages, we're going to come back to the parent experience and think about what parenting is like for that trajectory. So from Fred, parenthood is an inner change. We ourselves grow because parenting is so deep and intense. And I really appreciate the truth in those words. Deep and intense feels very right. And I think parents, we have a recognition of that, right? That parenting is incredibly deep and intense. But what we want to do now in these, we're going to have some breakout rooms for all of us to discuss together how we can keep in mind as professionals this fact that parenthood is about change. And what does that mean for our ability to connect with and support parents and families? So for these breakout rooms, we will open up some options for you, and we'd like for you to choose the room that feels best for you. So we're going to have rooms broken up by age group of the child. And what we'll ask you to do is join a room and discuss what is the parent experience like at this stage. So if you choose to go to the kind of middle school age group, what are parents experiencing and feeling and going through at that age? So we'll just keep our discussion to that. We'll spend about 8 minutes in these breakout rooms. As soon as you join your room, just dive in with a discussion together, and we'll come back and we'll have a chance for a little bit of share out about what was discussed in each room. So we're going to open these rooms. We'll try to keep the numbers like somewhat balanced. If you see a room that you're interested in only has a few people, you can join that one. But we'll go ahead and get started, and we'll see you back here in just a few moments.
We
One
have
space there.
there we
Oops, totally missed that 1 minute mark note, and we were still in the midst of sharing, but it was a great session.
Same.
Yeah, welcome back, everyone. Yeah, we were still in the midst of talking too. But let's go ahead and kind of share out. So those of us here on the screen will give just a little report of what our groups talked about. So here you were with birth to 3. We'll start
Yes,
there.
we were in the amazing infancy toddler group, and a lot of us shared that, especially in these years, since a lot of the educators on the group work with young moms, first-time moms, there's an there's a sense of moms or parents generally feeling very isolated in that age. When they have new babies, a lot of them don't know if what they and their babies are going through is unique or if that's something that every mom and every parent experiences. So creating avenues, social avenues for parents to come together and talk about their problems, or just, getting validated about, what they're going through is a very common experience, has been helpful. There were also mentions of, we had somebody from Canada who said that dads who are on leave also feel this sense of isolation and feeling a little lost, especially as, they're trying to understand if this space is even meant for them and not feeling welcome at times. So there was a lot of conversation about parents feeling isolated when they have new babies, not knowing what to expect, and not knowing if what they're going through is indeed okay.
Thank you. I'll share from the preschool room I was in. Some things that stood out to me are, that age, the parents having nerves around separation from their child. In some cases, it's the first time, and yet also being concerned about college. Parents are already thinking long term and thinking ahead for their children's future. And we had a lot of discussion about we're already talking about engagement and what's possible for parents at this stage, and how sometimes Zoom late at night is much easier for connecting than coming after school for a session. And so yeah, the particular needs of that age are certainly different. Was there another preschool group? Yeah.
Yes, I was in the other preschool group, and we also had a really great discussion, and some of the things that stood out in our group were similar thoughts of it being a very nervous time, and it's very overwhelming. That word was brought up by a few different people, overwhelmed, because it's a time of a lot of transitions. People are sending their children to school for the first time and then getting ready to send them to kindergarten and trying to figure out how to support them through that change, but also supporting themselves as the parent, especially for first-time parents, that can be really, really challenging. And we talked a little bit about supporting children through going to school if there's language barriers between school and home, or differing education levels between the parents and what the children are going through, and how it's difficult for the parents to support their kids at school when maybe they didn't have the same experiences for whatever reason. But it seemed to be a consensus that knowing that feeling of being overwhelmed is kind of a first step for educators to help support those parents in that transition time.
Thanks. Annie, you were with elementary?
Yes. My group talked about how this stage, people start to get really busy with other activities and, being on the go, and parents are often craving connection with other families because it can feel isolating. And at the same time, it's really hard to find opportunities to make those connections. It's hard to add another thing to people's plates. And so sort of that tension there, I guess. And then also we talked about the importance of relationships, and of course with other families, and then also with this school, how there's no one right way to have family engagement with the school, but that relationships are sort of at the core of all of those pieces.
Thanks. Mallary, middle school?
Yeah, awesome. Before I jump in there, I just wanted to read a couple of things from the chat that I thought, if that's okay. I know I'm kind of going off script, but I didn't write down who said it, but so I think it was Jill, parents saying that parents getting together at every age is really important to learn what others are going through, what successes they have had, as well as challenges and the opportunity to share tips with one another. So that was wonderful. And then I saw another one come in. Amy said, I think what's a common theme here is that parents really need a supportive community at every age and stage of their child and parental growth and development. So I'm going to start with those, and then I can share middle school, and then we can share some of these out later as well. We're going to talk more about this later, but let's see. Okay, so our middle school group, a couple of things that came up were themes around the idea that, children are exercising their independence, right? They're trying to test some boundaries. They're really thinking about what that means. And so how do we kind of help parents navigate that? And what are parents feeling? Parents kind of are doing this little dance too, because they want to be able to be engaged, and sometimes they're not really sure how to do that. So, someone said, does your student even want them there, right? Like they don't, they knew how to interact. They'd gotten down in elementary school, and now they're like, now what do I do, right? So one of our participants shared that they did a recent focus group. It was Betsy in Chicago that they did it. And they learned actually that the ways in which kids wanted their families to be involved were very similar to the ways that parents wanted to be involved themselves. So she said that was a really interesting finding there. And so they kind of wanted their parents to be involved as kind of advisors, or kind of like this consultant role. And we talked about the importance of giving kids space and building trust, and really kind of knowing how much space to give, and parents navigating that as well. Hope I did okay, group. I think that was our main things that we talked about.
Thanks. Yeah, Rebecca, you want to share about high school?
Yes, and we were really just getting started. So if you were in the high school group and you want to say more, like put it in the chat for sure, because we can keep learning from each other and sharing our experiences. What our conversation was centered on in terms of how far we got was actually this experience of, as a parent, feeling like the school wants you to be hands off, and that you may be getting messages that you're really supposed to be supporting students in advocating for themselves. And so that can kind of translate into like, I should step back. And the need for really intentional structures and strategies and clear expectations to be put in place so that parents are supported and continuing to be engaged, whether it's setting up, formal ways for them to do it and to come together, or, really just articulating like, we want to hear from you as a school or district, because the circumstances are kind of acting against that in a lot of ways. There was also a discussion about how, oftentimes when students disengage, there can be kind of a rolling down the hill effect, right, of parents also taking a step back and disengaging, when really in those moments the opposite needs to happen. And folks in that group definitely keep chiming in.
Yeah, thank you. I echo that. Please, this chat is awesome. Please keep using it to share your thoughts. And just want to point out, I see Latanya's comment here about being the parent of a college student. You still need support. And we think about like parents of babies are new parents, but if you're a parent of a college student, you've never been the parent of a college student before. So we're always new. We're always new and learning and growing in this. So we can go back to the slides. I want to transition now that we've had the chance to kind of bring these thoughts up ourselves. I want to dive more into parent development. So we can skip right on ahead to slide 22, skip through these, the breakout kind of sharing ones. So on slide 22, we've got a quote from Fred Rogers that I think is a really good place to start here as we dive into parent development. So this is Fred reflecting on himself as a parent. He says, when our sons were born, I thought, how in the world will I ever be a father to teenagers? Well, thankfully, you don't have to be right away. It's so important to be able to be the father of a 1-year-old before you're the father of a 2-year-old. And this is very encouraging, I think, for all of us. In all the time I spend with Fred Rogers' legacy and work, these ideas of presence in the moment and slowing down always rise to the top. And so this is a good reminder to us as parents and as people who work with children to be in the moment where that child is. But also for us as professionals working with parents, that we can be reminded to be in the moment with where that parent is in their parenting journey. So with that, Mallary has some things to share with us around what these parenting journeys are like and parenting development over time.
I just love that quote so much. It's always hard to just like jump back to the research after a quote like that. He's just so amazing. So thank you for sharing that, Emma. I'm going to give a quick overview on the research on parenting, which shows that it's comprised of three primary constructs. So knowledge, beliefs and attitudes, and practices. And each of these affect each other and vary with individual characteristics and experiences of both the child and the parent, as well as with cultural, racial, ethnic, and religious backgrounds, socioeconomic status, and tons of other factors. In addition, parenting changes over time. So things like parents' social cognitive awareness, their abilities to reflect, their insight into their children could become deeper over time. And we know that parent and child development take place in the context of that parent-child relationship all along the way. And finally, parent development isn't linear. So, it's not like you keep going on one path and things keep increasing in the same way for everybody, right? So nor is there one universal parenting developmental path. That's kind of obvious, but it's also, played out in the research. But what we found is that there may be some similarities. And as we've talked about these different ages, in the questions, the experiences, the thoughts and the themes that parents may grapple with as their children develop. Excuse me. So one thing that I did want to share with you all today, I'm not sure how many of you may have seen this. This is Ellen Galinsky wrote a book called The 6 Stages of Parenthood. And this study, she did a study, and as you can see, took place a long time ago. So it was 1989. So tons has changed. So I just want to say that out front. But these stages are still a really interesting jumping off point, we thought, to explore some more about parent development. So what she did was she interviewed a diverse group of 228 parents across the United States. And she found some stages that parents move through, that she found some commonalities with her qualitative analysis of kind of what things that parents were going through, right? So we talked a lot about these. You're going to see some of the things that came up in your groups in these themes as well. So the first stage she talked about was image making. So during this time, parents are imagining what that child might be like, right? And what is it going to be like to be a parent? And then in the nurturing stage, parents think about I guess their main task is to form an attachment with their baby. So they're learning, again, also how relationships with their other people in their lives, their family, their friends, how that changes as they become, that changes as they become more focused on their babies. Then she talked about the authority stage, which is toddler and preschool years, and parents learn about how to set rules and how to manage children's behavior and to think about, kind of how much authority or that they want to have versus kind of, doing that little dance with their preschooler and as they become more independent. And then even more so in elementary school, parents grapple with their child's relationship to the outside world and what their role should be in helping navigate that for them. And then during adolescence, children becoming even more independent, as we talked about, right? So parents are working to kind of renegotiate those relationships with their children. And we talked about this in some of the themes for middle school and high school, right? And how do they engage in joint decision making and kind of share power in that relationship? So the research, as I'm talking about it now, I heard a lot of similarities in what we were talking about. So the way we think about this at ParentPowered is that parents go from being a captain to a co-pilot with their children. And as parents, children, and the nature of their relationships change, so should the ways in which we engage with families. So now we're going to kind of move into the how. So to truly support children's learning and development at every age and stage, our family engagement efforts need to respond to these changes in the relationship, also to developmental needs and to changes in how school is structured from preschool to elementary to middle to high school. And this is how the parent program's designed. So it's family engagement that grows with the parent and child. So we're going to try something here because it seems like the chat is really active, which is awesome. So we're going to kind of we're going to share some high-level examples and strategies from the perspective of what schools can do and teachers can do. First of all, we're going to do this at every age, but we want to acknowledge that many of you come from other organizations. So we want to hear from you too about what this means from you. But this was kind of just as a jumping off point, we're going to share. So for each age group, we're going to share some high level strategies. And then we're going to pause and we're going to ask you to share your own thoughts in the chat. And we're going to, Emma and I will try to work through that as best we can. So the question we want you to think about is, and I'll put it in the chat too, in your role, what does it look like to engage with families of children at this age? What strategies do you use? So basically, before we were talking about what it's like to be a parent, what parents are going through, and now we're shifting a bit to talk about the how, right? How do we support families at these ages? So I'm going to turn it over to Emma to start. We combined birth to 5, like infant, toddlers, and preschoolers. So do you want to go ahead and share some strategies there? I'll drop this in the chat too.
Yeah, absolutely. So like Mallary said, this is a list of 5 points just from the research around family engagement about what's really important for families at this age. As this is up, like Mallary said, please drop in the chat what you do or think or are wondering about in what it really looks like to engage with families that are at this stage. So I'll read these and say a bit more, but please just start adding your thoughts in the chat. So things that are really important for families at this point are to get to know their unique strengths, their needs, their goals, to start to build really strong relationships, to offer varied opportunities for families to share in their children's learning, to support parents as advocates, as leaders, as decision makers, and to create connections. And so as I'm reading these, I'm thinking of things that you all have already been dropping in the chat. There was a comment that came through a bit ago saying parents of very young children need to be celebrated and need to have their voices heard. You know, we celebrate young children. We're so excited when we see babies and toddlers but there's so much value in those parents feeling celebrated for this new role that they've entered, and certainly so much value for them to be heard. So when as professionals, we can ask parents, what do you think? And let them know we know that they are the expert in their child. Those early years are so much about coming into some confidence around your role as a parent, and it is hard. And so in our roles as educators, there's so much you can do to support parents in that in those first steps. And the last point about creating community and peer connections, I know that's been dropped in the chat too, how essential it is for parents to be able to connect with other parents and know, okay, this thing that I'm going through with my child that feels just so hard because it is so hard is normal. And so thank you for all of these thoughts you're sharing. Keep them coming, and we're just going to kind of slowly walk through different stages. So Mallary, if we want to go ahead on to the next one, but yeah, please keep sharing these ideas. They're gold.
Awesome. Yeah. And as I go through this, Emma, I don't know if you want to kind of take a look through these and maybe we can take a pause in between after elementary and share some of the things that are in here. We can try that, but we'll see how it goes. So let me see. So what did I want to share about elementary? So the elementary years have tons of opportunities to build relationships and communication with families. So one of the things that we found is that if you build and use existing routines, like things like communication folders, back to school nights, parent-teacher conferences, that can be effective. Second, and this is a really rich one, and I saw tons of comments on this before, and this is important at any age, but offer many opportunities to listen, right? To listen to parents. Third, as you build connections with families, make sure to offer multiple and clear pathways of two-way communication. Each year offers the opportunity to remind families, yes, we want to hear from you, and this is how you do it, right? So this can be as simple as reminding families of the number to call to reach the school, or encouraging them to write a note when they have a concern. Fourth, when you share what's happening in the classroom, provide parents with specific questions to ask their kids. Like, I heard you're reading the book Frindle in class. What did you think of that book? Or what was the funniest thing that happened today? And finally, build consistency and help parents know what to expect. So for example, let families know that math homework is always on Tuesdays or that band is always on Wednesdays, and be clear about what they can expect. So we were talking earlier too about being clear about expectations. There are certain things that, you're going to want tons of input on. There are other things that might be school policies that you can listen, but you might not be able to change, things like that. Just being really clear about that. So yeah, so I don't know if we want to, Emma, do you think we should go on to middle school, or do we want to read through some of these?
I'll share just a couple things I was gathering as I was scrolling through while you talked. So I'm seeing a lot of people sharing about how important it is to celebrate good news. We think of like schools reaching out to families with the bad news. We have something to talk about, but reaching out with good news, sharing about when a child was a helper at school. Some people have mentioned celebrating accomplishing goals for parents, like when a parent sets a goal for themselves or with their child, celebrate that when it's met. Have conversations, not lectures, make it really back and forth. And I've seen a lot of comments too about creating environments that celebrate family cultures and honor different traditions that families are bringing into spaces. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, well, let's move on to middle school. But before I do that, Mary side messaged me and had a great idea. How about we share the chat as like a takeaway at the end? So if you guys are interested in that, we will do that. Great idea, Mary. So so middle school. So I have to admit, I told Emma I'm going to dive a little deeper here. It's really close to my heart right now. So bear with me as I have a 6th grader and an 8th grader. And we talked about this in our group too. It's really hard for a lot of parents to know how to engage in the middle school context. So right from the start in your earliest communications, you can tell and show families clearly and explicitly that their engagement matters. Ask for their feedback. And also, this is something I learned from Rebecca too, is peel back the layers on how middle school works and how parents can fit into that equation. So for example, invite families to tour the school. And for each stop on the tour, orient them around engagement, like stop at the office and show them who's the person that's going to pick up the phone when they call. And if you can, record the tour so families who can't make it can at least watch it later. Next, research shows that it's far more effective for parents to support adolescents with overarching learning strategies as opposed to direct skill support. And this was another really interesting thing for me, feeling like, oh, well, I love math and I should be able to support them with their algebra or whatever it is, right? But consider this. So consider meeting as a grade level team to decide what the strategies and routines will be. For example, families can establish homework routines or check-ins around questions that students might want to ask their teacher. And so working as a team can streamline communication. So parents get fewer and more impactful communication. And it lets families know that these are strategies that are important and can be used across all subjects. And finally, research shows that parents need more support around understanding adolescent development. And they need ways to be involved that honor and leverage their child's growing desire for independence. So we talked about this a bit. Sometimes parents can interpret, this desire for independence as a cue to step aside and disengage, right? Rather than engage differently. So basically, they need support in navigating kind of from that captain relationship that we talked about to that co-pilot relationship. One way to do this, for example, in middle school is to hold student-led conferences. So that's one strategy you could use. Let the students kind of take the lead on what they want to share with their families and what questions they want to cover. And next, should we move on to high school?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So finally, one thing that we talk about at ParentPowered, we aim to help parents be partners in their children's post-secondary planning. So one way to do this is to extend your family engagement team to include college and career counselors and intentionally map parents onto that process of that college and career planning. So basically for each activity that you ask students to do around this, like assessing their interests, investigating possible careers, you can give parents developmentally supportive ways to participate. You can give them those, I think I saw someone say the conversation starters, PCS. I don't remember who said that, but I saw it come through in the chat. So give them questions to ask to spark conversations and reflection around their children's interests and their career aspirations and goals. And also when you plan events, you can include parents as experts, right? Like use the expertise, like they are the experts in many things. So research has shown that when it comes to career planning, teens are more trusting of things that they learn from family, friends, and teachers. Second, because so much of this phase of life involves honing skills that set adolescents up for adulthood, consider giving parents ways to support their adolescents in developing universal skills like adaptability, collaboration, communication, creativity, and problem solving. And finally, always center mental health. Again, this is important across all ages. But a recent study report from the CDC found that mental health among students overall continues to worsen, and especially among high school students. So we also recently surveyed parents of incoming high schoolers and asked what areas they wanted support with. And overwhelmingly, the topics related to mental health and well-being received the highest numbers. Providing support around mental health means leveraging community-based mental health experts. It means soliciting feedback from parents and teens themselves and working to create communities where parents and teens can speak openly about mental health. And, often this might mean hosting conversations in places that families are already comfortable going. So those are just some of the things we wanted to highlight. We have a minute or two. Do we want to share? Did anything come through that we want to highlight? Or is there just so much that we're not sure? Let me know, Emma, because I've been chatting.
Yeah, I'll point out a couple things that I've seen that are coming up as a lot of people have said they've had success with offering workshops around like these big transitions that families are going through from, elementary to middle to high school, like questions that families have about literally how does this work? What is middle school going to be like? They found that that's been really helpful. I think a big theme that I've seen through a lot of these comments is the importance of establishing safety and making sure families know that they are trusted and heard and will not be talked down to, but will be seen as the experts that they are. One great comment here from Anne is about like the importance many times of switching from parent to family to be really inclusive of all kinds of families. And so, yeah, there's just been a lot here. I'm really glad we're going to be able to save this chat and share it with everyone at the end. So a lot of, to move on, we've been talking about what's maybe different as you move across these ages, but I think what's most important is what stays the same. So Mallory, I'll let you take over.
Yeah, and I do want to call out Anne's comment. I think that is so important. And one thing we should have said at the beginning is using the word, like trying to use the word family, sometimes using parent and caregiver, but absolutely, like families look all kinds of different ways. So wanting to share that as well. So yeah, so we talked about all the ways that family engagement shifts and that parenting evolves with the growing child. But as we've seen tons of recurring themes as well, that things that stay the same. And this is because there are fundamentals that need to be applied across all ages to ensure that family engagement builds towards responsive and authentic partnerships with all families. So wanting to share some of these kind of overarching themes that we thought of. We've also talked about some that we've all thought of together today. But at every age and stage, families really need to know that their engagement matters. We also think at every age and stage, engagement needs to be responsive to families, schools, and communities. So it's a living, breathing thing that's co-created based on families' cultures and their lived experiences, and it involves tons of listening. It also, when it comes to family engagement, we want to set everybody up for success. So it needs to be strength-based at every age and stage. Great family engagement's doable and scaffolded and leverages families' unique relationships, their interests, and their expertise. Along these lines, accessibility is key at every age. So reaching families in their home language, giving them many ways to join in, and always noticing who's not at the table. And finally, it needs to be effective, of course. So at every age and stage, we need to know that it's working. So we need to steep our family engagement efforts in ongoing research, ongoing evaluation, and continuous quality improvement. And we need to do this from birth all the way through 12th grade. Okay. Emma.
Yeah, it's a really, really brief recap. Family engagement matters all the time. Parents change over time. Parenting is always looking different. Exactly what kind of effective practices are best, can shift with your context, like the age of the child, the family, but there's so much that stays the same. And Mallory just walked us through all of those. So we have just a few minutes for questions, I think. Rebecca, if you want to share anything come up.
Excellent. And thank you so much, Emma and Mallory. This has just been such a wonderful overview that has given us so much to think about. And this chat is truly extraordinary. So this will be a wonderful share out for everyone. Want to invite folks to pop any questions you have into the Q&A. We have a few minutes to answer your questions, but as you're doing that, I just wanted to put out to both you and Mallory and Emma, what's one thing you think all parents need to hear? I know that's a big question, but when you think about the overarching journey, what's one thing you want them all to hear?
I'm happy to hop in with what I know Fred Rogers would often say about this is that you are what your child needs. You have inside of you what it takes to do this job that is so very hard. But you've got it.
I love that, Emma. I love it. And I'm seeing some great comments. I'm just going to read them and then I'll share mine. But basically, that they're doing a great job. We are here for you. We are here for you. We are proud of you. You guys are going to make me cry. Let us know if you need anything. You are enough. That their kids are that they're their kids' number one hero, that they're worthy and nothing less. Parents need to hear you can do this. I think the other thing is that I would say is your voice matters, right? Your voice matters. I think I might just leave it at everyone said such wonderful things. So we have some other questions coming in, I think.
We do, and folks are still popping things in. Wondering if you can both maybe speak a little bit to, we have these life happens very quickly as a parent and as an educator and administrator. What are some ways that we could all be kind of pausing to reflect in order to guide our practices and our behaviors throughout this parenting journey? Are there questions we should all be asking ourselves? And I guess maybe speaking from both the perspective of the educator and the parent as we think about supporting this journey.
The first thing that comes to my mind is what we had talked about, Fred's own reflection on being a parent of a 1-year-old before you're a parent of a 2-year-old, and that it's so hard to lose sight of that, but just constantly reminding yourself of exactly where you are and that you can stay there and you can be where you are, both in a big season of life kind of a way, but also in a very exact moment. I know that can be a really grounding practice, is to be in a moment for a moment.
I love that. I'm having trouble focusing, but because I'm reading all these amazing comments. But I think one of them that it looks like Lisa Ann put in: remember, small interactions daily with your child are just as important and sometimes more important than big fancy events and opportunities. I love that. I think in doing that, I think to answer your question, Rebecca, that allows you, right, this simple interactions approach that I know the Institute, Fred Rogers Institute, has worked on. Really, it's those everyday moments. And I would say that, that fits with every, dyad that you're talking about, right? Parents and children, teachers and parents, other roles with parents. I think, I think it is just so important to recognize those small moments. One other thing that I always think of, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Dr. Brazelton's work. Over the years, I had worked at Touchpoints, Brazelton Touchpoint Center, and he always said, value passion. And so basically, parents are coming with all kinds of experiences, but all parents want what's best for their child, right? So even though it might be hard at times, and we have to take care of ourselves and each other, think about that, right? It's hard to do, right? But they might seem angry or they might seem upset about something, but it's all coming from a place of passion and wanting what's best for their child. So I think that takes a lot and is really hard to do. I don't want to say that that's an easy thing, but something that stuck with me from working with him.
Great. We've seen a lot of comments come in around human-centered design and co-design, and really making sure that parent, caregiver, family voices are part of or at the table when we're deciding how parents want to be supported, and that parents have places to openly talk about these things with each other as well. And I'm wondering, both for the two of you and folks on this call, have you seen some really great examples of bringing parents in to the table, gathering parental feedback in ongoing ways? Like, what are some strategies you recommend we can employ to really bring parent and caregiver voices to every table that decisions are being made?
Yeah, I mean, I can jump in just really quickly, and then Emma, I don't know if you have thoughts, but this is more of kind of an overarching strategy around that, and not necessarily a specific practice. But have families, like when you talked about human-centered design, have families decide what those opportunities are, right? So like you need to be like, families often, and kind of getting them together, they often know other families best, right? And so they'll understand kind of the needs of their community and what makes sense for them and what's already going on. So my first step in that would be to not only offer varied opportunities, whether they're virtual, in person, you know, like different, it's not a one size fits all, but it's also building parents as leaders, right? Like letting them tell you and share with parents about things that are coming up. So I think that idea of parent leadership, as well as being flexible, is really important.
Yeah, and as you were saying that, it reminded me of a comment that was made in the breakout room I was in, which is a center that has had success with actually asking families to lead family engagement work. Like you're saying, just like ask them to host an event or a discussion. So yeah, I think there's so many opportunities there, and we should probably go ahead on to our next couple little things here. We want to end in part with one more reminder from Fred Rogers. So
here, can you move the slide up one, please?
Thank you.
So our children are richer when we let them know that we, even as adults, want to grow too, and that we hope to keep growing all of our lives. When we tell children we want to grow, it shows them so much. When we as professionals tell parents that we're growing, it can help them say to us, yeah, I'm growing too. So we want to leave you with this, and thank you so much for joining us today. We have one final slide. There's a QR code that you can follow to access a couple of resources. Thank you all so much for your engagement with this in the rooms and in the chat. This was a really lovely hour, and we're really glad that you were all here. And we hope to see you again. We'll have all of these resources and things to you very soon.
Thanks, everybody. It was wonderful being with you today.